Need help? Email Dale at help@trustdale.com. You're tuned in to Trust Dale Radio. Here's your consumer investigator, Dale Cardwell.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much. It's another one of our most popular segments.
It really is.
Lee Meriwether with Meriwether and Tharp is in the studio. Lee, how you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. In recent years, Lee, there has been a huge growth in online divorce websites that sell divorce paperwork so that people can avoid the cost of a lawyer. But as with many have heard, you often get what you pay for, right, buddy?
You absolutely do.
With us today in the studio, as I said, is Lee, and Trustdale's certified family law expert to talk with us about DIY divorces and what should people be wary of when trying to do a divorce on their own. So, Lee, out of the gate, it is doable. It is a path that some people can pursue. I suspect it should be a small number of people, but what are the optimal circumstances for doing it yourself, if there is?
Well, usually when I say the optimal circumstances are when you've got no children and you have no assets and no liabilities together. So maybe a young couple that just got married and they didn't get credit cards together, they didn't buy a car together, didn't buy a house together, they may have an apartment together. So one of those situations are where the DIY divorce really does make sense.
And hopefully no anger, too.
Yes.
Because anger blows things up.
Yes. I had a divorce where they were married for 3 months, and it took 9 months to get a divorce. Now, our client... Yeah. 3-month marriage,
ridiculous there.
9 months to get divorced, and the husband in that situation was very angry.
Yeah, buddy, can I get a little personal?
Please.
Didn't you go the DIY route and then you realized it was a mistake?
We did try. We tried to use a single attorney, and it did not work out like we thought it would. I mean, it still was amicable, and still everything worked out fine. But it's not. This is certainly not a DIY project.
No, I would not think so either. Lee, in some sense, your firm competes against DIY attorneys in terms of our divorce websites, right?
Yep, we do.
If someone picks up the phone and calls your firm and says, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this," how do you counsel those people?
Well, okay. So first off, we really don't have a problem with it. We kind of like competition, so no issues with that. It makes everybody better. But when people call and say, I really can't afford to retain you full, but I've got this website that says I can do all my paperwork for $300. The first thing I tell them, well, our website actually has most of those documents for free, at least here in Georgia for the Metro County, Atlantic County, the counties in Metro Atlanta, sorry. So first I tell them they can get it for free there. But the second thing I tell them, look, even if you can't afford to retain us, you should look into just coming in for a consultation. So, which is, at our firm is $300, but there's other lawyers out there, good lawyers, and that you could find it anywhere from $100 to $400 for a consultation. So you try to do the paperwork yourself, but before you sign on the dotted line, run it past a lawyer. It doesn't have to be our firm. It can be any good family law lawyer that this is their area where they focus in on, that they can check on it first.
Okay, so let me see if I understand this. So if someone fits the description of qualifying to do it this way, and you kind of described those parameters, hopefully newlyweds, living in an apartment, do not have common credit cards, they don't have kids, they don't have a lot of assets, you're going to help them do this. They fill out the paperwork free. They find it on your website, and for a $300 consultation, you're going to check their paperwork.
We'll check their paperwork, and the other thing that a lot of these websites don't do is tell them about the process to get their divorce finalized. And so we'll walk them through that process. Okay, you've done the first step, but here's what you need to do so the judge signs your final judgment decree and grants your divorce. So we walk them through that process.
That is a public service, actually, because these people, if they find themselves in a position that now we're talking about people that don't have anger issues, they don't have children, they don't have a lot of assets, but imagine it probably cost them $10,000 to get married or $50,000. I think I could dig up $300 to make sure I was doing something right.
They may have gone to the justice of the peace, but if they have none of those issues, my question would be, why are you getting a divorce?
Yeah,
but
that's
you never
sad.
know.
That's sad. But you guys are experts at counseling people in those circumstances, and you're pretty happy when you save a marriage, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I talked to someone this morning that's what they called in about, and they'd had problems, and spent an hour with them on the phone just trying to give them things to think about and resources they could do so they didn't have to call me back. And so that's what they're going to do. They're well, at least I won't say which spouse it was, but one of the spouses is going to go reach out to the other spouse and try some of the suggestions I had. So hopefully.
That's awesome. Lee, what is the number one thing people can do to take a deep breath and perhaps avoid a divorce?
Well, I think one of the best things to do is slow down. We're so busy today. Everything's just rush, 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 rush. And if you got into a situation where you feel like you're about to get a divorce, things aren't happy, slow down and look at where you are and how you got there. And if anything, try to call a counselor and sit down and talk with them, because when you sit down in front of a counselor, they'll force you to slow down. They're going to ask you questions, a good counselor, to engage you in how did y'all get to the point where you're thinking about a divorce.
In your experience, do certain trigger problems wind up leading to infidelity, or is infidelity sometimes the trigger that actually breaks up a marriage?
Well, I have found that often infidelity is really a symptom of another problem that's going on in the marriage. A good example is one of my favorite books is The 5 Love Languages, and people don't speak, somebody may not speak the other person's love language. So they tend to drift apart and they find someone else. And it wasn't really that they found someone else because that's what they were looking for. It's just they lost that loving feeling, for lack of a better term. But, to be really short about it, you may have someone whose love language is what's called acts of service. So when I'll use the husband. He works all day, hands the wife his paycheck, and she has a hot meal on the table, takes care of the kids. With acts of service, she's serving him, and he feels like he's loved, that a great marriage is great. But her love language may be quality time. So when he goes on the weekends to play golf with his buddies because he thinks the marriage is great, she thinks that he loves his golf buddies more than her because he won't spend quality time with her. And next thing you know, maybe she looks for someone else who will listen to her.
He just described the plot of Terms of Endearment.
Yeah, exactly.
That dates me a bit.
Yeah.
So, Lee, what are some of your issues with these DIY divorce websites? What are your concerns?
Well, I have two overriding concerns. I don't have any problem with people trying to help meet a need out there. But where you get into the situation, so outside of the case we talked about at the very beginning, is where you may have children together or financial issues together, and what they can't do is give legal advice, and they also can't give what I call experience advice. So let's say they're thinking about doing a parenting plan, and they were thinking about, this is how I want to arrange everything when it comes to the kids, and they put it together, and then they get divorced, and they realize, oh my gosh, this was a horrible mistake. What was I thinking? Or one of them thinks that anyways. But if they can come to a lawyer, a good experienced family law lawyer, will say, hey, have you thought about this? I know you're thinking of this divorce in the moment, but I'm going to look a year or two down the road, and let me tell you, all these cases I had where people came back to me to modify this because it just was not a good idea. So those websites can't give those experience pieces of advice. And then the legal advice could be catastrophic for people. I had a guy this year who came in, and he very smart guy. I mean, he made over $100,000 a year, thought he could do it himself. His wife hired a lawyer, however, and he unknowingly entered into paying her over $1 million in alimony.
Oh. I'm going to submit.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alfie. I'm going to submit. I bet you that your firm has a track record of former spouses who probably get along today better than a lot of divorced couples, simply because they went through a process, recognized what was fair and equitable, and can get along today. Am I right?
Yes. I mean, that's our goal. We're resolution focused. If we can help them work through this process, that will continue as they continue their relationship, because the divorce doesn't end the relationship if they have children.
Well, and buddy, you and your former spouse are a perfect example of
we
folks
were texting each other this weekend. We've been best friends.
That's great to hear. There is life after divorce.
Yep.
If you want to learn more about Lee and Meriwether and Tharp, go to trustdale.com and you can learn more. We'll be right back with Lee.
Scam artists don't want you to listen. You're tuned in to Trust Dale Radio. Here's your consumer investigator, Dale Cardwell.
Hey, everybody, the show never ends.
It doesn't.
We're talking to Lee Meriwether and Buddy Wofford about old stories.
Yes.
Going parking, getting shot at.
Our dating stories.
yeah, but we didn't get hit. That's important.
Yeah.
So during the break, Lee, Buddy said that last time on the show, and I was probably out of town, that you brought up some research that was relevant to this myth that everybody thinks 50% of marriages end in divorce. It's not true?
It's not true. So Shanti Feldhahn, in her book, The Good News About Marriage, was a Harvard researcher, started researching the source of that quote, that stat that's quoted all the time, it seems like, on the news. And the best source she could find was in the 1970s, when all the states enacted no-fault divorce laws. Somebody had predicted the divorce rate would climb to 50%, but it never actually did. And what she did, the best source of information, was the 2009 census, and you can look at the newest one since then, but I'm just remembering this from the book. 72% of married women reported being in their very first marriage, and of the 28% that did not, that included death. So less than 28% was the divorce rate in 2009.
Stunning. And Buddy, your thought about that?
Well, my thought was, couples hear that and they think, well, if everybody else is getting divorced, what's the problem? It's discouraging when you're trying to save a marriage. So I think we need to spread this long and far and wide, that it is a myth and that is not a fact.
Yeah, and so, Lee, when someone comes to see you guys, I mean, I'm sure that you get people that are saying, hey, thank you, I appreciate the fact that you guys would love to see us keep this together, but we know it can't be healed, and I guess you take the cues from that.
Yes.
But if people are coming in and you just sense anger, how do you talk them down and find out if it's really what they want or if they're just angry?
Well, the first thing is I just ask lots of questions. I ask for their permission, basically, to dive a little bit deeper. And then sometimes I could find, like, an easy example is, men and women process information differently. We all know that. There's so much studies on that now. And so men there's some research out there, they kind of crave respect more than love. And so the way a woman could talk to her husband, where she doesn't mean it a certain way, he thinks it's being disrespectful. So he gets angry and angry at her, and then he doesn't show her love, so she gets angry at him, and it creates this vicious, crazy cycle, which is talked about in this book called Love and Respect by Dr. Egerich. So you have to start asking lots of questions to start getting to the root of things, where things can be going wrong. And that's where I think a lot of people go wrong. They just get angry and they say it's all his fault or her fault, but they never stop to ask themselves questions and start digging deeper. And so that's what I do in those phone calls. And often they call me and nobody's ever asked them certain questions before. And it forces them to slow down and think about where they are and how they got there.
Let me ask you this, Lee, because I sense that in 2016, people are more open to going to see a counselor than they might have been 20 years ago. Are they?
They are. I still get a lot of resistance from some people. You tend to get a lot of men that will put up a resistance. And so usually my response to them is, especially if I got somebody on the phone, they're like, well, I don't have the problem. She's got the problem. I usually have two responses depending on who I'm talking to. The first one is, well, great. If you don't have any problems, then you need to go to the counselor so that you can, learn what her problems are so you can deal with them.
That makes sense.
Or if someone, or I'll say somebody, especially if they're into sports, and like a good example. So let's say they play golf, and I'm like, well, have you ever hired a golf pro to help your golf game? Well, absolutely. It was one of the best things I ever did. My golf game went way up. Well, then why wouldn't you do that in your marriage? The counselor is really just a golf pro, just helping you with your marriage to make yourself better.
That's funny. I think you would get people that their reluctance would be, well, I don't want to find out if I'm the one that's got a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you've got people that say, I'll go because I can't wait till the counselor explains to her or to him why they're the problem.
Right.
But, Lee, I'd say that there's a really good chance they get there and find out it's mutual.
Yep. And what I usually tell people is when you go to counseling, be prepared to own your part of the pie. So if you look at the pie, the divorce pie, everybody has a piece of that pie. Even when I've had cases with bad actors on the other side, or even a certain psychological problem, the other person still, there's a certain level of ownership that they need to take for why they have gotten to where they are. Because at the end of the day, they married that person to begin with.
That's true. And so even if you feel justified in your position, and even if the counselor tends to think that this came unraveled because of the spouse's position in this, you've still got to respect the fact that that's the person you married.
Right.
And you had an opportunity to discover that about them early on, perhaps. But, people fall in love, their judgment can get clouded, and you make decisions. I have a buddy, Lee, that says you don't get to choose who you love. And I think that's probably true.
Well, the heart wants what the heart wants.
That's right.
But that's where it comes into that love at that point is a lot of people see love as just a feeling, and they lose that loving feeling, and then they want a divorce. But what they don't realize is there comes a point where love is at a certain level a biochemical response. That's usually that in love feeling when you first get married, first meet someone. But then it crosses up past that, so you become comfortable with them, and that biochemical feeling starts to go away. And that's when you really have to choose to love your spouse.
We just have to work at it.
Yeah, and you, in a sense, you study your spouse. What makes them happy? And then what happens is when you see this with a lot of couples, they pour themselves into learning and studying their spouse, and they suddenly become happy, and they're like, oh my gosh, my wife, I don't deserve all the amazing things she does for me. I've got to return the favor. So that's where you turn the crazy cycle backwards. And so you start having this awesome cycle of love and respect just going back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah. I remember telling my kids at one time, they're both marrying age and in the process, and I said, and with all due respect, and I'm going to be flat honest, there are some days that it just simply boils down, am I a happier, more content person because I am with her than if I would be if I was without her? Mm-hmm. Because there are some 51, 49 days,
Oh, yeah.
And I suppose it's fair to say there's some 49, 51 days. But at the end of the day, is this a person that you feel fortunate to be able to go through life with, to share the really tough times? Because life has a lot of tough times.
One of the most fascinating things I ever saw was a reporter who interviewed a couple who had been married like 65 years, something ridiculous. And he said, "What's the secret to a great marriage?" She goes, "Oh, that's very simple. We just simply never fell out of love at the same time."
That's a good way of putting it.
I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, because there have been times in mine and Angie's relationship, she's fought for me, and I would hope that she would say the same that I had done for her. Lee, what if the situation is one where one spouse controls all the money and the other has no access to resources? Is there anything that can be done about that?
Yeah, so in those situations, you've got in Georgia they have a statute. They have a statute in Florida. Those are the two states I'm licensed in, but I'm almost positive that all the states have some statute that allows the spouse that doesn't have access to resources to go to the court and have the court order the other spouse to pay for their legal fees. So we had a case just this year where the husband liquidated part of his IRA and then gave his lawyer a big old fat retainer and then filed for divorce. And when you file for divorce, a standing order goes in place in many counties that says neither party can liquidate the marital estate except in the ordinary course of business, which means she can't tap into any other retirement account or investment account because it's been sort of frozen with this order. But the statutes allow you to go to the court. In that particular case, the judge ordered him to take more money out of his IRA to pay us so she could be protected.
It serves him right.
Well, you got to play fair.
That's right. Lee, you guys have offices everywhere. How do folks get in touch with you?
Well, trustdale.com is first place.
There you go. Here's that $5.
And our website, mtlawoffice.com. So M is in Mary, T is in Tom, mtlawoffice.com.
And so if this is something you're thinking about, praying about and need to know that someone's going to listen to you and not necessarily try to push you into one direction or another, I feel confident in recommending Meriwether and Tharp because I think your heart's in the right place, Lee.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Hey, everybody, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.
TrustDale.com.